You're welcome back. And Newsfile is brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. My Way Insurance, dial *165# on the MTN to join. Duroplus, how you get your water matters. Remember, where Duroplus goes, water flows. DBS Industries, Roofing, Papa Fie, and Rehoboth Social Housing. Your housing dreams become reality. My guest this morning, we are very excited to welcome Lawyer Joyce Bawa Muktari, spokesperson, former President John Mahama, and Antoinette Chibu-Dakon, who is Executive Director, Dankwa Institute, and Deputy General Secretary, NPP. Kofi Bento is Senior Vice President, Imani Africa. Dr. John Osai Kwapong is Fellow, CDD Ghana. And later, when we have to deal with the matters of Ghana and the IMF talk, we have Harry Yamson, Managing Partner, Ishmael Yamson and Associate. Kofi Bento will remain with us for that discussion. And Professor Lord Mensah, Lecturer, University of Ghana Business School, will also join us. Ladies and gentlemen joining us via Zoom, good morning and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
Right. We get you here once in a really, really blue moon. Okay, thank you. Yes, Dr. Antoinette Chibu-Dakon, this will be your first time on Newsfile with me.
Yes.
I don't recall having you.
No, I've been on Raymond's. I think I used to do Raymond's.
Right. Right.
Do something on education.
That's right.
And stuff,
right.
But I haven't been on Newsfile.
Good to have you. Good to have you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get straight into the issues, and we are looking first at the pronouncements by the Abetifi MP Brian Champong, and we would also combine that with the U.S. State Department's release on human rights abuses, such a terrible, damning record in Ghana, even though they chronicle most of the things that we already know that have happened here to us, but they do it in a way that brings you to really have a rethink about what is going on. So let me begin with you, Madam Joyce Bawa. And when the statement was made, it clearly was intended for the NDC. So the NDC reacted. I saw a statement first, I think by my friend James Agalga, saying that this was wrong and the police needed to get in and arrest Brian Champong. Then subsequently we saw an official petition led by head of legal of the NDC to the police headquarters seeking that Brian Champong should be arrested. There have been several comments on the back of what he had to say. The Peace Council have also gotten in, and they say they are unhappy about what is going on and it's inciting of violence. Why are you so displeased with these comments to the extent that you want criminal processes to be instigated?
Well, thank you very much. Very good morning to you, Samson, and good morning to everybody else. Indeed, I think I haven't been here since 2020. So
okay.
Especially to your show. And so it's actually a very good morning that I managed to make it here today.
We're happy to have you.
Pleasure is mine. And hello, Antoinette. Good to see you. And those who are joining us virtually, of course. You know, Samson, this is a matter that has literally generated enormous opprobrium. In other places, inflammatory comments of this kind, of this nature, would certainly have led to even more mayhem. And especially when you think that this individual clearly was speaking to the National Democratic Congress and apparently literally serving notice. We live in a constitutional space. We all have, one time or the other, probably made comments that maybe were not so palatable. And in most cases, when these things happen, people would render an unqualified apology, and then we all move on, especially depending on the caliber of individual making these statements. Indeed, the Honorable Brian Achampong is a member of Parliament who was sworn an oath of office as a member of Parliament to the good people of Ghana. He also doubles at the time as a Minister of State and currently has been elevated to the enviable position of Minister for Agriculture of this country. It is therefore unbecoming for anybody to even consider that this is just political talk because it was said after a health walk with party faithfuls. It is also unacceptable, judging by his track record so far. And I believe that we all remember what happened in the Yaya Osu West Wogan by-election. He was actually named at the hearing, and certainly no sanctions have come since then. We also know what happened in the last election, 2020, where 8 individuals, Ghanaian citizens, lost their lives. So far, we're still waiting for what remedies, if any, will come. Indeed, it is also unacceptable for anybody to think that it's of course right for the MPP to continue to moralize and demonize each and every citizen who dares to criticize them, and yet they themselves continue to perpetrate and, distribute such violence, such aggression. Look, when you are in government, the responsibility is yours to maintain the peace and security. Many observers are currently very, very uncomfortable, first with the body language of government, with the utterances of persons who serve in government, with the approach in how government actually reacts, where there are criticisms in one way or the other. It continues to shape people's public perception of just what sort of government we have in place. And it's no gainsaying that the vain glory that these statements actually, achieve because you're speaking to our party faithfuls ought not to be tolerated. Indeed, something, one of the key components of a successful democracy anyway, is also the level of tolerance of those who are elected to serve in office at any given time. It is the reason why not everybody would put themselves up to contest as flag bearer and eventually become president, or for that matter, put themselves up to serve as a member of Parliament. You ought to have or display a certain moral uprightness, a certain respect for the rule of law, a certain respect for the Constitution, a certain respect even for the people that you govern. It is in that vein that we have also witnessed how the U.S. Human Rights Report has chronicled, explained, literally codifying all of these conversations that we've been having over the years, at least for the last 6 to 8 years, if you ask me. Indeed, what is contained in the remarks by the Honorable Brian Achampong are despicable.
So
everyone in Ghanaian ought to condemn them.
In some, here he was speaking to his party, faithful, and encouraging them that there was some economic turnaround, there's some recovery that is beginning to happen, fuel prices going down, and things will get better. And so if the NDC was hoping that the economy will get worse, and that on the back of that, they will lose power, that will not happen. Then he says that the NPP, and this is summary, the NPP will never hand over power to the NDC. That the party will use all means necessary to remain in power. If the NDC dares use threats and brute force in the election 2024, the NPP will show them that they have the men. Someone will say, this is just boastful talk. He cannot implement, will never hand over power, supposing they lose power. So why should you worry about that?
Something, his comments, despicable as they sound, are actually evident of the insufferable arrogance and impunity that has characterized this administration and most of the key players. Note that the Vice President was actually on that walk, and he was in the midst of all these conversations. And I would have expected him to take at least a certain moral high ground and maybe even proffer a better constitutional alternative to the comments that were passed by the Honorable Brian Achampong. Indeed, if you recall, there's also this wanton disrespect for the persons, because of course, when you make these comments, irrespective of the fact that this is your party activity, it would actually feed into mainstream media, as we've all experienced over the years. And so we ought to condemn. And I would want to state, for the avoidance of doubt, that the winning party is actually incumbent upon performance, at least satisfactory performance, first and foremost. It is also incumbent upon how people feel about your time in office. Note that we have a constitution which actually also prescribes what to do even in the event that you have disputes as a result of election results. Note that you also have a transition act which actually determines how handing overs are done. Remember that a few years ago, I think last year, President Akufo-Addo himself, when he was in Malaysia, had cause to indicate his preference to hand over to an MPP administration. But of course, being a lawyer, his comments were actually nuanced. So even though he received some criticism, it actually set the tone. And suddenly you can see that gradually, I listened to Nanabi a few days ago, and it's almost as if this warmongering is the new attempt to literally pull the wool over the eyes of Ghanaians. And then to state that we're expecting that the rather abysmal failed economy that they actually continue to hope for a certain improvement with is even more mind-boggling. And you see, that's what I'm saying, Samson. So all that matters to the new patriotic administration is just to stay in power. Whatever means possible. Is that really why we go out there to elect people to serve us? That they would want to literally possess power, and then with this sort of arrogance of power? Samson, everybody has posited, and every economist will tell you, that this country is totally bankrupt. Look at the humility of our finance minister yesterday at the IMF board meeting. Should operatives of this administration be speaking in the manner that they're doing? Take, for example, the level of, deference to that board yesterday. And I didn't hear one Bible quotation, surprisingly.
Okay, so that's a joke in town that Ken Oforiatta spoke to at the conference for 1 hour, and there was not a single Bible quotation.
And that is not lost on anybody.
I've read the document by Ghana to the IMF on this. How many pages? 20 plus pages. There's no one single reference to a scripture. But that's on the lighter side. I'll return to you on how you respond now that as it were, the retaliation game has begun. Because there's reference to comments that are seen in similar vein by President Mahama, and the questions are, so what is it? He's done this. This has been said before. It's not new. So the issues of equalization are coming up. In fact, the NPP has proceeded through its national organizer to also file a petition to the police asking that the former president be arrested and charged for specific offenses. We'll come to interrogate the question of the specific offenses that the NDC says Brian Achampong should be charged with, and that the NPP also says the former president should be charged with. Yes, Doc.
Yes, something.
How do you defend Brian's comments? It's been defended left, right, center by operatives of the NPP. How do you defend them?
Very solid. And I think what Honorable Brian Achampong said was good. He laid a foundation. You see something? We have freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And our constitution allows that. So as individuals, we are all responsible for how we carry out our message and how we tend to say what we want to say and the implications of what we want to say. Now, within the context of what was happening, and I was at the walk, I was a front runner. It was an amazing work. It charged our grassroots. It brought people together. The energy that was there, the positive spirit. In fact, what I liked most about it was the colors. For some reason, the red and blue was just dancing in everyone's eyes. And with that same enthusiasm, Honorable Barney Champon said, I am going to give the grassroots a message. I'm going to give our supporters a message. Remember, it's a combination of delegates, supporters. We'd even also have NDC, mixed. Everybody would come. And Kwewu during Easter time is Kwewu Easter. So that same spirit was also there. You could feel it there, that something was happening in Kwewu this weekend. And the MPP met, the Eastern Region actually organized the walk, and the National Party organized and helped them. And it was an amazing walk. We did so much, and it was so interesting. And I think what Brian was doing, or Honorable Brian was doing, is, look, we have a political trajectory since 1992, where after every 8 years, there seems to be a trend where there will be a change. So that same spirit is what probably is in people's mind. But the MPP is determined that this time we will cross the 8 years and ask for the populace to give us another 4 years. Give us another 4 years. Give us a longer time. That means we get 12 years to implement programs, policies, projects, and let's see how then it gives Ghana a different picture. Will it put us into that, the development path that we've been fighting and asking for that? Give a party a lengthier time, and let's see what they do. So he laid a foundation for this. It was a confident pitch. What he said was, we have had challenges, we've had issues, but let's not the NDC think that because of these issues, we are just going to give up power and hand over to them. We are going to fight and do everything that we do. For him, he believes that if the NPP will go into the next election with a solid record of the delivery of the things that we have done, and we can convince the good people of Ghana that we would deserve another 10, this will be on the right path. So the NDC should not just think that it's going to be a walkthrough because it's going to be 8 years, and therefore we would settle back and say that, okay, here we are. And you should also remember that he's talking on the backhand of the different comments, on the different utterances. And we are not here, I don't want to delve into a competition of who has said what and what, but you do have to remember that we are coming from a history of a lot of utterances by the NDC. And as we approach the 2024 elections, this is not what is going to be the end. It's going to come on both sides. One would say would also respond. And that is what makes the politics. And the people want to hear who is the one who is saying the most, who is telling us, how are we going to be convinced that you will do it? So then he goes further to say, look, we have a track record. It is stronger than that of our opponent. That even when our opponent did not face the kind of challenges that we have faced, we have still been able to go. And we are putting the economy right back. We also have a new presidential candidate. You have an old presidential candidate. He's been tried and tested before. We are giving you a new path. So you see, this is the kind of mind that we are psyching, and we are trying to get people to see the MPP in that positive light. And he spoke in that same positive tone, with that same enthusiasm. We will fix the economy.
We will not have had a discussion. We will not have had this discussion if he stopped there.
If he stopped there. He didn't stop there. And Brian Champon, Brian Champon speaks with a lot of spirit and enthusiasm. And if you see the crowd and the enthusiasm that was there, he spoke, and I support what he said. We needed to get the masses to understand that we will not give up. We would put and we will do whatever we can do. And on the backhand of what the NDC had said, we are revolutionary, we are the ones who are better on violence and etc. He told them, he said, we also have the men. We have people. We have people who can stand up to you. So please, nobody in the MPP should be afraid, scared, or intimidated by the utterances of the NDC. No, we will do what we have to do to protect our people, and ensure that we win the 2024 elections. Everyone wants to win elections. Sometimes I wanted to ask you, what are political parties formed for? It's not for dancing or for any. No, we go to win elections. And after you win elections, what do you want to do? You want to offer better things to the good people of your country. You have a plan. But before you are able to implement that plan, you have to win elections, isn't it? So if the NDC starts to say that, oh, what Honorable Barney Champon said is offensive and is this, okay, so can we also go back to all that the NDC
win the election at all means, by all means.
We will win elections. We would even kill people if it means we will even die. You see? So the utterances that everybody is saying to be able to win elections, when they come out to come and explain,
I need you to restate that the NDC has said, we will win elections, we'll kill people.
Oh, I can
Kill
read
people.
some of that there.
Kill people.
I can read some of it for you. I have
NDC said it well.
I have a lot of it here, so I can start.
NDC said it well.
No.
This particular one.
I'll start reading all of it for you.
No. It's a moderator show, so we have to be sure about that.
The NDC, the NDC flag bearer. Well, hopefully he will be the flag bearer, as Honorable Joyce, I'm sure, would say. No one can beat us in unleashing violence. This is ex-President John Mahama. We have the do or die comment. We also have suspected election rigging by Mr. Alex Mood. I've got a lot of.
No, I was
we are
asking
more violent than you, Anita D'Soso.
No, I was talking about the specific
I'm going
comments.
there. Samson, hold on for me. We're going there. We are prepared to sacrifice our lives for Ghana. And then we can go to the recent statement by the Ashanti Region Swami organizer, the one who was arrested, Razak. He said it. He said if it means that we have to die or we have to kill people, we would do it to win the elections. Or you weren't privy to that statement.
What did the NDC say about it?
I can Google it and give it to you just.
What did the NDC say about it?
The NDC came out to say he was arrested.
Mm-hmm.
He was arrested, there was procedures, there were issues and etc. But it is not a contest of words. Okay. What I'm trying to talk about here is that the utterances that everybody is going, and the person will come out and explain what they have said. And this is what Honorable Brian Champion's statement is referring to. So do we want to also take what he has said, interpret it for ourselves? Is that what we are doing here? That's the question to ask. Is that everybody going to take what everybody says? The person makes a statement. He assured members of the MPP what he's saying. He says the economy will bounce back. He's come out, he's explained it. The party has issued a statement in support of what he said and has clarified and explained it and has said this is what he meant. On the backhand of what he said, he's saying that what it takes, when he says that what it takes means is that he says we will put a good presidential candidate across. We will fix the economy. We will make sure that we've sorted all our challenges. We will give the Ghanaian populace hope.
The comments you just, some of the comments you just referenced attributable to former President Mahama. Mm-hmm. You support the position of the party that he ought to be prosecuted over those comments?
In the interest of us looking for peace, and in the interest of, I think the National Peace Council has come to say that, look, let's cut out some of these utterances. And I support the party's position that it is time for us to curb some of these utterances. Do or die statement.
No, the specific statement you just looked at. I'm saying you support the party when it says with the petition to the police that former President Mahama should be arrested and prosecuted.
Investigated, yes.
So you are okay with that, but you are not okay when it is said that Brian Champong should also face a similar situation.
If somebody, I think that is what the NDC has petitioned, isn't it? That Brian Champong should face a similar situation. I think when things have been placed before criminal CID, etc., they are the ones going to take,
No, what I'm asking is whether you support their position as well.
There's nothing about me supporting the NDC's position here. Okay. I'm here as the MPP Deputy General Secretary. I stand by what my party says. We have gone through discussions and deliberations. We have analyzed situations, and this is our stand on it. We see that some of the utterances by former President Mahama and etc. also needs to be, and the NDC chairman, the national chairman. We also believe that these are utterances that need further investigation and prosecution if, the case should be found so.
Because they are treasonable.
That is it.
Because
the NDC
in your petition, you say because these are treasonable,
exactly.
and they incite, violence.
Yes, understand what
let me ask the question. Let me ask the question. And that they incite violence.
Yes.
But Brian Champongs don't come close to that.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. In his statement, and I have explained where he's coming from, and I already said it. I said everyone is subject to opinions and beliefs. If you or the NDC also have substantiated evidence that this is what he meant by his statement, and they have petitioned and have also gone ahead, I think it's up to the authorities to look at all these statements and to decide and get back to us. But as a party, this is where we stand. These were the implications and this was the reasoning behind what Honorable Brian Champong said. That is my belief.
Thank you. Let me bring in Kofi. thank you for joining us, you and Dr. Osanya Kwapong. All right, Kofi, tell me what you think about the statement that has led to the current discussion and how the two parties are posturing over them.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you, Samson. It is unfortunate. It is unfortunate because when we were growing up, I remember 1991, when this constitution was taken off. You had people like Dr. Janet Selby. You had Peter Lajete. You know, they claimed the tradition of Professor Buzia. You had B.J. Darocha, whose shoes I am not fit to tie. And you know where I'm going. You had people who, even if you disagreed with, you cannot disrespect, because you knew they had standards and they will not go below it. And they sought to build a certain tradition. You can have arguments with their ideology, but these were solid men. You had Peter Lajete, comes from fisher folk, but distinguishes himself. Now you have a situation where the people who take after these very honorable men are in a race to the bottom, trying to jockey with other people on who can be more violent, on who can do the more dastardly things. And it breaks my heart, because I don't know where this will stop. And I don't know when we will try to engage in a virtuous circle, try and build up to a more virtuous system, appeal to our better angels. This is more than just winning election, okay? Look, there's a whole generation of people who didn't see coup d'etats. They didn't see countries melt down and break down. And what they see is this democracy, and they see it not working. And then they hear us talk about all these lofty things, but they see people on a stage racing to the bottom and trying to prove who is, capable of more violence. Let me say this for the record. The democracy we have, or democracies in general, are not for political parties. They are for people. They are for us. And look, everywhere in the world, in the US, look, you know what's going on over there. If you go to Europe, Berlusconi has been, found guilty in the past. I was in Israel, and I saw the demonstrations where they took the power from their politicians. Democracy is for people, it's not for politicians. Politicians take advantage of democratic systems to prosecute their own selfish agendas. Unfortunately, you hope that leaders will raise the system to a lofty level, bring it to the top.
Are you disagreeing with the NPP that Brian didn't say anything wrong?
I know you want me to go specifically to the issue, but for me, it's more important that we tell our people that this is not who we are. All right? So, yes, I disagree with what Brian said. Okay? But look, I understand the lady there trying to say, this is the party's position, this is what we think, and they want to, justify and equalize it. This is what political parties who don't have a care for rising to the top, who want to fight to the bottom do. But this is not what it should be. Look, you don't take a national platform and use it to incite things like this, because there are people with those tendencies. And those tendencies are either moderated by the utterances of leaders, or they are giving energy by the utterances of leaders. And we hope and expect that our leaders will say things that moderate these tendencies. Again, you see what's happened in the US. You get one leader who seems to support something, and all of a sudden you see the underbelly that they have pushed back come. So yes, specifically, we need to condemn what Brian said, not because we don't understand all the details and cannot analyze it and say it is good, or analyze it and say it is bad. It is generally not right. No matter how you want to justify it, it is not right.
The parties have followers, and they need to energize them. They suggest to you that their followers feel intimidated somewhat, and this is how to get them to understand that the NPP cannot be intimidated by the NDC. So this was a reply, a reaction.
This is not how you energize. And for me, I don't see what they were reacting or replying to. You don't energize people, okay, to their baser nature. You energize people to rise to their better selves. So what I'm saying is important because there are people in the rank and file with these tendencies. You don't energize them. Look, when it blows out, Brian Champa will pick up his US passport or wherever and fly out. And those of us who are committed to stay here will have to find a way. So, again, the bigger issues are important. And look, it is more depressing, it is more disappointing that the party did not come and moderate what he said. All right. We have seen ex post facto rationalizations in this country. Look, in the time of President Rawlings, if some of you remember, he will give a boom speech, and then the next morning the party will line up people to come and explain what he said. We've seen a lot of that. We understand that's what political parties do. I'm saying if you're going to rationalize ex post facto, you rationalize downwards, you ratchet down the heat. So it is in fact, more disappointing that the party seems to energize what he's saying. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, this is what he meant. He didn't mean that we have to go up and show people that we can be more violent. And because they said it, we can also say it. I'm simply saying we are better than this. We have seen in this tradition better people, better utterances, better leadership. And we are hoping that this race to the bottom, where one party wants to show the other party that I am worse than you when it comes to these things, should stop.
Well,
when we hear loftier statements.
Well, the NDC has petitioned. The NDC has petitioned the police, and they specifically say that what he said is contrary to, or is caught by Section 207 of the Criminal Offences Act, which is offensive conduct conducive to breaches of the peace. Section 207 says a person who, in a public place or at any public meeting, uses threatening, abusive, or insulting words or behavior with intent to provoke a breach of the peace, or by which a breach of the peace is likely to be occasioned, commits a misdemeanor. You agree?
I don't. Look, I have listened to what he said. And honestly, there is a portion of it, or generally speaking, you can take that with a pinch of salt as political speech made in the heat of the moment after a political rally on a political platform. Yes, I have condemned it. We all should condemn it. Question, does it rise to the level of a criminal offense for which he should be arrested, investigated, prosecuted, and jailed? No. No. And then again, like I kept saying, politicians play these things, and we need to rise above them, okay? It should be condemned. It's morally reprehensible. It is dangerous for leaders to say things like that. But this is where the Peace Council and co. should have a dishonorable list of persons who have misconducted themselves in the process of the political party or politicking or election.
Thank you.
We can have that list somewhere. But it does not rise, in my view, to a criminal offense, knowing that you have to prove it beyond reasonable doubt.
All right, staying with the issue of a criminal offense. Staying with the issue of a criminal offense. So your point is that these comments that have generated all of this and gotten the Peace Council to talk, and you are referring to the Peace Council, they, at least, are not likely to occasion a breach of the peace. Not at all.
No. I speak as a lawyer. That one speech alone cannot be proven in a law court with evidence that it will lead to A, B, C, D beyond reasonable doubt. If, however, a series of those speeches, or if they continue, if we don't condemn them and let them know that, look, we see through these things, we see through what you say, we see through what the party says, you actually annoy us. And I'm telling you, they've lost some independent votes by some of those things. But to run it through a criminal accusation process, prosecution, it doesn't rise to that. We'll send ourselves through unnecessary stress. How this has to be dealt with is with organizations like the Peace Council calling it out. And I'm saying, make a list of it, put it somewhere. Let's have somewhere in the website people who will be listed as having dishonorably conducted themselves, and having said things that were poor, bad, not in good taste, and let us shame them. Now, if it continues, then we know what to do about it. But this alone, if you arrest Brian Champon today, you can put him before God.
They refer to certain things that he's been associated with. And among them, more substantively, is what happened in Ayawaso West, which you roundly condemned. And the report was issued by the eminent panel, Emil Short, Justice Professor Mensa Bonsu, and former IGP heading it. There was a recommendation that faulted, there was a finding that faulted Brian Champon, and a recommendation for a reprimand. The white paper disagreed with that recommendation. They are saying what happened there should give you an idea of what he's capable of doing. That he's wealthy. He's wealthy. He has wealth. So he can commandeer a lot of things. I have seen you on social media not too long ago criticize, if I'm right, the prosecution of a mere citizen who doesn't have wealth, who doesn't have the power to take arms to do anything, Oliver Barker, for posting on Facebook. He didn't meet a crowd to incite them for anything.
Yes, see, what happened for which we had a commission and very serious people wrote a report and made recommendations is what we should have pursued. We missed a huge opportunity. And you remember all the things I said about that. Now, one of the things we said is that not doing what was recommended by those eminent persons is what will guarantee that people like him will continue in this way. Now, this particular action on its own, like I'm saying, will not be sufficient in my view to have him convicted. Okay? What happened in the last instance for which he was not punished and nothing was done, despite all that went through, which was more serious, okay, tells you that this one will also not go anywhere. But what we should note is that failing to do what we should have done in the last instance when it was clear and necessary is why we have gotten what we've gotten now. If you fail to punish your child, he will later punish you. And I think that's what we are facing. So yes, if you add it up, it looks like, well, this person has the means to do A, B, and C, and so this and this. But the point is this: if you arrest him, this is what your evidence is. You will not be able to, charge him for all those other things that he's already escaped. So my point is, when things arise, for this case, what I think should be done is a lot of reprimand and an insistence that we would mark him as having acted dishonorably. The last time it happened, it should have been worse than reprimand.
So that's where people ask you the question: where is your constitution that says equality before the law? If you can prosecute people for quote-unquote treason, for Facebook comments, for Facebook coups, how much this?
Yeah, I agree with you. And something, what I'm saying is that the last time that he did something like that, which was more serious, which was actually associated with him, a panel was set up, they went into it and made a recommendation. We should have acted. Then the punishment was proper and was, due. We did not act. Now he's done something which, in my view, is milder. Okay, he made utterances. Look, there will be defenses of freedom of speech and all those other things that will come in. In this particular instance, I don't think that he will be found criminally culpable beyond reasonable doubt. So the point I'm making is that we should have done what we needed to have done last time. But again, the politicians don't care about nurturing a democracy. And it is one of the things we criticize the president for. And that is why we are having what we have.
Okay.
The democracy, ours, is not for them. We should continue to call them out. The last time we called the president out and said he did wrong. And by doing that, he has energized this gentleman. And that is why he's doing what he's doing today. And he should hear it from us that this is wrong and he should stop it.
Okay. Dr. Osai Kwapong, you have just authored the book, 5 Presidents, 8 Elections, 30 Years Later, How Ghanaians See Their Democracy. We are launching this book next week. But tell me, you must have had the opportunity to observe Ghanaians, read them, And do you think that they feel we should be concerned about these comments, the manner we are?
Good morning, Samson. Good morning, everyone. I want to say good morning to my 13-year-old nephew, Jude Wilson, in the UK, who is watching Newsfile for the first time today. So back to your question, in all of my observations, and I'm going to share this more publicly on Thursday when we launch the book, but what I've ended up doing is I've come up with, in my view, based on all the analysis of the information that I have, is to look at what I call the assets of our democracy, but also the liabilities of our democracy, and how we hold on to those assets and mitigate the liabilities as we make our way towards, the next 30 years, because I believe that, this has come to stay. We've made our peace with it. Should Ghanaians therefore be, do I think that Ghanaians would generally find such comments concerning? I believe so. Yes, I understand that, in the heat of politics, in the moments of excitement, political activists, political party figures can get excited, can get carried away and say all manner of things, even if they do not intend for those things to be used for wrong purposes or harmful purposes. But at the same time, as we say about free speech, you try not to shout fire in a crowded theater because you don't know what's going to happen when you do that. That is why, for me, and especially knowing that more and more, our elections are becoming quite a high stakes contest, right? That what you want to do is not to do and say things that increases the temperature around an activity that already has a lot of high temperature around it. I think what you want to do is to make sure that we try our very best to, in certain moments, be moderated, in our utterances, right? I mean, the Honorable Brian Champol may not have meant it for, quote unquote, anything bad or anything evil. But you also don't know who can get incited, right? And stand on those words, rightly or wrongly, misconstrue it and use it for some other purposes. And for me, that is why I think that when you see some of the sentiments coming through all the 9 rounds of Afrobarometer that I have looked at, we believe we must choose our leaders through elections. But we also have some concerns. One of the liabilities is the extent to which we sort of rate some of our elections as completely free and fair. So when we really want something and want it that bad, that's the way we want to go, obviously I expect some concern when it appears that someone doesn't want to honor that way that we believe should be the way we should choose our leaders. But like I said, you just never know the consequences of some of these utterances. That is why generally you try as best as possible to exercise some of these speeches with a little caution.
I began by asking Joyce Bauer why we should be concerned in the first place, because is he capable of doing what he said? If he meant it literally, that, well, if you did something, we will also show you that we are more than capable, to use, force. And people reference that quickly to Ayawa, so that he was in charge and he was the guy who ensured that that wrong happened. Now, we're in a democracy. I thought our democracy was at a point that if a party lost power, it could not say it will continue to hang on to power. It will not hand over. So that's why I ask, why should we be concerned if you say we should be concerned? And all of you have referenced previously comments that have been made by politicians in similar, taste. If you remember how the media was awash with the discussion and the fear of candidate Akufo-Addo saying, all die be die. Etiwa, those comments. Nothing happened. So why should we be concerned?
You're correct. Statements have been made in the past, and in the end, our better angels prevailed. And so we are tempted to sort of just brush it away and say, oh, sebe, these things are always said in the heat of the moment. Nothing is going to happen. Ghanaians are peace-loving people. And I generally believe that we are peace-loving people. What I'm also at least cautioning is that you also just never know that one moment where our better angels may fail to prevail. And that is why, for me, we should quickly try and nip some of these comments, in the bud to say, okay, things have been said in the past, nothing happened, we'll be okay. You can treat it as, quote unquote, silly political talk because we are in political season, all of that. And yeah, generally we can go with that. But at the same time, like I said, you just don't know when one day someone's better angel would not prevail. And so again, that is why for me, we need to be very, at least we need to express that concern that let's not even start wavering into these uncharted waters, right? Because you just never know who is going to respond with what. And is this how we're going to keep going until election 2024 when there are more substantive issues?
The Peace Council is concerned, deeply concerned, as they suggest to us. What should they be doing? What can they do?
I think I think the Peace Council, for example, can work with our major political parties. Yes, I'm sure the parties cannot, quote unquote, control what everybody is going to say at any given moment. But at least our favorite word in Ghana, synthesize, right? Sensitize, right? You can find ways to continue having these regular dialogues with our key stakeholders in the electoral process to make sure that they understand that our elections are, quote unquote, not a matter of life and death, right? That if it's a matter of life and death, it has to be more about the future of our country. Which direction do we want to take the country? What kinds of policies do we want to prevail, right? And in articulating and discussing and debating those, we should also at the same time make sure that our temperament doesn't ratchet up the temperature over something that, tends to generate a lot of heat. But I think the Peace Council should continue to find ways to work with our key stakeholders.
Or rather, the criminal process should be activated. And I see that you have been following what is happening in America. The guy you don't like that much is being prosecuted.
Right. Exactly. And you're right. Kofi Benson was saying that if you, for example, took Honorable Brian Chabon to court, it's not going to pass the legal test. But I also learned something very, very important from Professor Kwesi Prempeh. During the Hotel Kufuor saga, he wrote a piece in which he talked about both the legalese of conflict of interest, but also the issues of public perception. And now I coin it as the appearance test versus the legal test. So yes, it may not pass the legal test and therefore nothing will become of it. But what I want us to also, focus on is the appearance test. And some of these political utterances do not pass that appearance test because it sends off the kinds of signals that you don't want it to send off. Okay. That is why we should also be very concerned that we are not doing things that may send off the wrong signals. I mean, yes,
whether you can use this to secure conviction or not. You and Kofi Bento clearly are aware that if any other person other than Brian Champon, if any ordinary Ghanaian had made these comments, as we speak, they may have been denied bail and they would be, sweating in a jail cell.
I totally agree. And in fact, it's one of the things that I point out in my upcoming book, in terms of there's a growing perception over the rounds of Afrobarometer that Ghanaians are beginning to say that ordinary people who commit crimes rarely get away with it compared to officials or high-placed people. And that gap is widening. And so that perception that there is a lack of rule of law, I think, is worrying. And so you're very correct. And it is one of those things where I think our institutions, through their actions or inactions, must begin to pay attention to it and say, why this growing perception that if I was an ordinary person and made such an utterances, X would happen to me.
All right.
If somebody else did, nothing would happen to them. So yes.
Okay. Let me get back to Joyce. So you heard from Kofi Bento from a lawyer's perspective. And I intentionally read the law and emphasize the portion which doesn't appear to require strict proof. It says that what you have said is likely to cause something, not that it has caused it. And his position still is that if he was a prosecutor, he would not pursue this. So, what do you think? What you are pursuing doesn't sync with many people.
Of the rather inflammatory comments that my sister has been making this morning. Look, contradictory, inconsistent, totally unacceptable. Let's put these conversations in proper perspective. That look back on the rules, that the rules were reversed and the MPP was actually in our place. There will be mayhem. One. Secondly, I totally disagree with whether or not this is a matter that should be prosecuted or not. Why? But for the charge sheet, we all know that. Put whatever charges you think, what offenses have been breached on the charge sheet. Let the judiciary decide. In any case, that commission that actually came up with the findings against Brian Achampong, was there any punishment? Were there any remedial things that were done?
The white
He's
people
actually being puzzled.
The white people rejected that, so you can't expect a punishment.
But at least he was indicted. Nothing was said, and nobody even chastised him or, sanctioned him. In fact, he's been promoted since. So that should tell you that people are at least delighted at the sorts of utterances that he's making. And Samson, if we want to sit here and then we pick and choose, we always nitpicking. Hate speech of any kind is despicable and ought to be condemned. People in office ought to show a certain fiduciary respect for the people they govern. Then, of course, we ought to remember, do you recall the matters to do with the Delta forces in the Ashanti region in particular? Look at what happened in Ayawaso West Wuogon in particular. These were atrocious incidents. And even though people sang and condemned them, they even jumped a high court judge, pregnant woman, in a court in the Ashanti region. Let us all be firm in our minds that what we criticized 8 years ago or 10 years ago ought to receive similar or even more criticism, because we now have an individual that we all believed was actually a respecter of the rule of law. So we ought not on any day to seek to coddle or pamper or pretend as if these things don't happen. You mentioned Baka, who gets mentioned in the Human Rights Report. What did he do? Did he have activists? Were they waiting to be excited? Were they waiting for a jamboree for people to tell them that we are actually what? Going out there to go and what? Get our young people to do what? That you failed on every key promise you made over the last how many years? Totally bankrupted this country. Now we are even waiting for haircuts. So you want to even give our democratic experiment even more haircuts. I shudder to think that when people go into politics, they forget their consciences. I wonder what my sister would have said 10 years ago in the same role if the same comments were made.
Well,
and let me put it on record. Let's not on any day assume that it is right or acceptable for any individual qualified to serve as a minister of state to speak in the manner in which Brian Achampong did.
Right. So,
and secondly, whether or not the matter will be prosecuted, I think that should be left to the people who judge these. We all have opinions.
right.
We all have perspectives.
So whether what they are doing,
the litmus test,
whether what they are doing is an act in equalization or not, the principle of criminal law is that there is no expiration to crime.
Thank you.
They have referenced comments that were made by President Mahama, and they say police must equally take an action on
At
those.
the time when those comments they claim to be so angered by were made by President Mahama. Did you not hear the criticisms that came from the same people who today are singing from hymns defending the indefensible? You did. You can play them back. And please, for someone to say that the MPP is suspected to have rigged the election in 2020 is not in any way the wrong statement, as she had tried to infer with the comments by Alex Mould. And you see, we should not try to nitpick and try to pretend and then, lay claims to all sorts of things that really do not happen. And the matter we are speaking, look, let me single out Mr. Akomia today. It is why he has always stood out as a man in that fold who actually is from the older version of the New Patriotic Party. He condemned those remarks as reckless. And I believe that we ought to acknowledge that he at least made an effort. But Samson, if Brian hadn't said these things, would they be running all the way to call on the police to arrest President Mahama? In any case, what happened in Kumasi with Razak? On what level was that in comparison? Who is Razak in comparison to a Home Minister of Agric? Look, all of you and all of us owe it a duty of care to leave a peaceful country for the generations even and yet unborn.
Okay. I take a quick comment and then we speak to the US report.
We must condemn.
State Department report.
Let me land by saying that when President Akufo-Addo, then candidate Akufo-Addo, made those Yen Akamfo and all die comments and all of that, were they not in the same political party? Look, it is right for you to now come into government. You want to serve in government. You don't want to leave office, but you want to go down to the doldrums. You understand? And you expect that everybody will wake up every morning and sing your praises.
Right.
In the course of COVID, they told us that they could bring back the economy, but not lives. What has happened in the process?
Okay.
Look, Samson.
Yes.
Let me say that what we all refuse to condemn, the things we refuse to criticize, the level of criticism that we actually greeted the NDC administration with, if we did a quarter to this government, they will collapse.
Okay. Dr. Antoinette Thibault-Darcon, there's a comment in here, and I want you to use that to reflect what you want to say. That Kwame says, I'm truly shocked that the two dominant parties can justify the reckless statements that their leaders keep churning out without considering the effect on the general population. Let's remember that it was seemingly mundane rhetoric that started the mayhem in Rwanda. We must all learn lessons not from ourselves, but from what others have gone through. There simply is no justification for bad language. And then he says, whether or not you think that this is rather from Ahin. The comment from Kwame, which I wanted to read to you, is this, and it's directed at Brian clearly. He says, at a time when we are being told that 65% of Ghanaians can't afford a healthy meal and that our country lacks adequate food security, is it not ironic that the Minister of Agric is more interested in retaining power by any means necessary with the men he claims to have, who may be unhealthy as a result of diet? Who did this to us? That Brian's concern and what all of you should be rallying him to do is what he can do with the ministry to assure us of food security.
I think that Brian has just been, he's just been vetted. How many months? I mean, he's just been welcomed into the ministry. So I think that's an unfair judgment on him. And if he should come out as the Minister of Agric to make a statement, and he's making it on a platform where he's addressing issues in the sector, let's wait for him to do that, and then you can call judgment on him. I think that's a bit unfair. But nevertheless, I think that we should also be mindful of how judgmental we are. I have never heard my sister Joyce here come out and condemn any of the statements that ex-President Mahama has made on site. And ex-President Mahama is higher in the hierarchy than Honorable Baini Champon. He's been president of Ghana. So yes, it is true, and I do agree that our own statesmen, looking at your stature and your position, you need to be guarded in what you say, because this whole thing means that it has implications. But you see, contextually, everybody would say that this is what I meant to say. And Honorable Baini Champo and the party has come out. We've put together a statement. And I wish that we had even asked, look, at the conclusion of the statement, there's this thing about remains a peace and loving party and would not do anything to jeopardize the peace and security of the state. I think, Samson, you agree with me that Ghana is lauded for being one of the democratic countries that is able to change over from one administration to the other. NPP has done it, NDC has done it. So a statement like that does not mean that if the NDC wins power, the NPP will hold on to power. You see, so as much as we are talking about the fact that even with that, you should be careful of how you do address your grassroots, because if you are not careful, you then incite that kind of thing that says that someone would take it wrongly. And I do understand that part of it. Yes, there are people who take statements categorically and do not look at the method, the whole metaphoric meaning of what you are saying, but take it as, hey, this is a hypothetical, this is what I need to do because this is what I heard. So I do agree with some of that, and we need to think through some of these things. And that is why I'm happy. No, let me finish, Samson. You won't interject me here, please. So when we say that, then I'm happy that there's a National Peace Council that comes to say that for both people, watch the way you are saying things, okay? And therefore, you can't say that when someone says something about killing people and he's a Swami youth organizer, he hasn't said, even if one life is lost in the election, it is a slight on us as Ghanaians. And
so now this is the point I want to make to you, that by parity of this reasoning, you want Joyce here to condemn the former president.
I asked you if she has done that because she was asking me the
So that's what you desire, right?
No, I'm asking her.
And you feel that
I haven't desired it. Don't.
A party member in wherever has done something. I'm moderating the show. I'll ask the question.
That's
you can refuse to answer.
Can ask. That's
right.
Fine. Go ahead.
That's a party member that some may say is not much of a quantity, has said something. You feel that also ought to be condemned. But when it comes to someone as important as Brian in your party, you say we should not condemn that.
I'm not condemning him because I understand the context within his book.
So how do we take you serious?
No, Samson,
when you say somebody has said a similar thing, we should condemn them. But one other says the other, we shouldn't condemn them.
Brian's statement. There was nothing about die. There was nothing about killing. So you see, take every statement within the context and where it was said. I was there when Brian was speaking. Okay. I understood even when he finished, we had conversations with him. I understand what he said. Why would I condemn something that I understand? If at the end of the day, the NDC Swami comes to defend, and I saw some of the explanations given by Sami Jainfi, and I said, okay, so in that state of euphoria, but the word killing, and I just said it. I said, yes, even with the fact that I understood what Brian said, and I don't condemn him, I still stand by the fact that we all need to be careful when we are speaking, because people sometimes take what you say, not metaphorically, but they take it with straight implication and say, because you have said this, this is what I'm going to say. That's just what I said. Okay, so I understand. And then I wasn't saying that Joyce should condemn His Excellency or ex-president. I said, have you condemned that? You asked me straight away that have I condemned? And I asked Joyce, I'm asking her, have you also condemned that? Let's all be, open and truthful about what we want to say. When certain statements, and I have just said it, I don't condemn Brian, I understood the context with which he spoke, but I still put a caution there and say that let's not run away with some. And I said it even in the beginning of I said there's freedom of expression and freedom of speech. So sometimes this is what you intend to say, but it comes out this way. Now, everybody else on the outside has their opinion, and it's allowed to interpret what you've said in the way they understand it. And that's why we should all be cautious in what we say.
So the Peace Council, put in a different way, don't condemn. All the Peace Council and all the others, including all on the table now, Professor Sai Kwapong and Bento, their concern, you're saying?
Their concern is justified. That's just what I said.
It's justified.
I just said their concern is justified because we need to be cautious in how we say. And I think that's what they were saying. They said, yes, there are things that people would say. And they said, and I think I even made that statement, that as we get closer to the elections, if you are not careful, this banter is going to continue. So sometimes situations like this then make us all take a step back and ask ourselves, where are we going? We need to be careful because you want to incite, enthusiasm, whip up your grassroots and etc. But the minute some of the statements you say tend to take a negative, dive, then it's time for you to also look at it. And that's why we are happy we have a Peace Council who then calls us both, to the drawing table and says, let's be guarded in how we make our comments.
Okay.
That for me.
Thank you very much. And my guests have been lawyer Joyce Bar Muktari, who is spokesperson for former President John Mahama. Dr. Antoinette Sibo-Darko is Executive Director, Dankwa Institute, and Deputy General Secretary of the NPP. Kofi Bento, Senior Vice President, Imani Africa. Dr. John Osai Kwapong is Fellow CDD Ghana. We'll take a quick break. When we return, we will briefly look at the U.S. State Department's human rights release. Doesn't put Ghana in the best of lights. Let's look at what it is. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. Kweku Osei-Tutu says, no party in Ghana can hold on to power if it loses election. NPP will hand over power to any party that will win the 2024 elections. I would have been worried if Brian Champong has said they will hold on to power even if NPP loses the election. Henry Olufanwa says it was a completely irresponsible statement, giving the man's formal indictment for what happened in the Ayawaso by-election, giving his status as a sitting member of parliament and his position as a minister of the republic. Power is nothing without restraint. Junior Masaudu says, in fact, this is not just a mere comment. We shouldn't just look at it. Actions should be taken. Gasma says, extremely dangerous and despicable. When you consider this together with the appointment of the 2 MPP members to the EC as commissioners, you will come to the conclusion that Mr. Champong wasn't speaking in a vacuum. This is why this shouldn't be overlooked. K. Amofa says, it's amazing what our leaders think, while most Ghanaians are thinking of how to get the next meal on the table. In our current economic situation, I wish every thought and concern of our leaders will be to find innovative ways to turn around Ghana's economy. Ben Akufo-Darko says, no responsibility for their actions, no hands up and apologizing. They will resort to past administrations to settle scores and justify their madness. This is how our governments have worked since the inception of the 1992 Constitution. Samuel Brian Boabing says, Brian Champong remains a patriotic citizen and a responsible legislator who will not dabble in anything to destabilize the peace of this country. Then Ken says, a basic mass communication principle, quote, encoding and decoding, end quote, requires that a communicator conveys and quotes to the target audience with clarity how he intends his intended message to be decoded or consumed. However, where a message is inconsistent with the intended purpose and provides space for strenuous rationalization, then there is a serious challenge. My contribution for the day. Thank you for your message. I guess I can pause here and then we will continue. Now, you may have come across the U.S. State Department report. It's a report that it issues quite often about, not only about Ghana, about every other country. And this time, the report doesn't put Ghana in the best of light at all. Not as though previously it has been that good about this country. President Mahama had a comment to make about it. Let's listen to him.
The U.S. Human Rights Report has come out, and it makes very bad reading. Human rights abuses, corruption, torture, so many things, discrimination, everything. Go and read that report. We will set up a governance advisory council, And that Governance Advisory Council would include civil society organizations, religious leaders, chiefs, and ordinary grassroots people. And every year, that council will release a report on the state of human rights, corruption, and everything in Ghana. It will release a report on our governance.
Right, so that's former President Mahamat's comments on the report. Among others, the report flags Ghana as having done some things quite not the best. And I'll just read this bit to you. It says, significant, that's the executive summary. Significant human rights issues included credible reports of arbitrary or unlawful killings, including extrajudicial killings, torture. You think you are listening from a report about some country, eh? This is Ghana. Torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment by the government or on behalf of the government, arbitrary arrest or detention, serious restriction on free expression and media, including violence and threats of violence against journalists, and unjustified arrest of or prosecution of journalists, substantial interference with the freedom of peaceful assembly, serious government corruption, lack of investigation of and accountability for gender-based violence, including domestic or intimate partner violence, crimes involving violence or threats of violence targeting lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex persons, laws criminalizing consensual same-sex and sexual conduct between adults, although not fully enforced, and crimes involving violence or threats of violence targeting persons with disability. The government took some steps to address corruption and human rights abuses by officials, whether in the security forces or elsewhere in the government. Impunity remained a problem, however. On this note, let me begin with Kofi Bentil. Kofi, I'm sure you have read this report, the specific, issues raised in the various topics. What do you say about it?
Samson, it was depressing to read it. And I got the sentiment you got. If you read that document, you feel like this is another country. This is not Ghana. But incidentally, you and I have chronicled these things as they happen. So we know this is Ghana.
Right.
What makes it so jarring is when it is all put together. And when it's all put together in a report like this, and you read, and you can tell yourself, we are not doing well. All right. I like President Mahamat's point about, setting up some sort of a body so that we will report on ourselves. It always wraps me some way when other people have to tell us about what is wrong with us, because we can also tell them what is wrong with them. But be that as it may, we must focus on the content and then see what we can do to, help ourselves. The important thing there is this: we are not doing well. And another thing to notice, when these things happen, at least civil society organizations and individuals call them out. We speak about these things. And on the piecemeal basis, they are just brushed off. Oh, please, you people, you talk too much. Oh, you human rights people, whatever it is. Look, if it happens to you, you would understand. So look, we need to be reflective, self-reflective. We need to do better. Our police force is a good one. I would always stand up for them. But I'm telling you something, too many things slip, too many things go bad. I mean, despite the fact that they are doing their best, they are trying, I really do believe that a lot more can be done. Recently, there was a swoop and about over 100 people were taken, okay? Now, I went and talked and found out what was it. And I couldn't find any good justification for the swoop, taking over 100 people and detaining them for hours on end. But even in that process, when I spoke to some of the commanders and some of the leaders there, they were very forthcoming. They spoke, they explained, you could see that, look, this is a force that is trying to do good, but too many unforced errors. In short, every leader in this country, especially in the security forces, should read that report and reflect. Number two, they should be minded about the word impunity. Impunity is a cancer. If you don't cut it out, it grows and consumes everyone. Impunity is where people with power, expecting not to pay any price for doing the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, and then also do not pay any price. And because of that, they do it again. We are just talking about some statements that have been made. Then we need to appreciate that our police service too often is used by people in power for the wrong things. And I'm saying this because you and I know some of the things that happen. I will make this call. I've made it before. I'm on a personal campaign about it. That we need to insulate our police service. And I'm saying this because the police is mentioned severally on different occasions, in different instances, where the police is mentioned as having been in or part of the human rights abuses. If you look carefully, usually they are tools being used by other persons with power. I have a personal conviction that if the police has higher levels of independence, it will be more difficult for them to be abused or used this way. Which is why I think if we have independent Auditor General, we have independent Commission on Civic Education, we have independent EC, the institution that is foremost in the maintenance of security within the country should have independent leadership. So that it would not be so beholden to the politicians that it cannot check their abuse of the force. What stops us from making the police, the IGP I mean, independent, like NCC, like EC, okay, he should not be sackable. He should not be somebody that the president can call and sack. Just like you can't sack the Auditor General easily, even though in this country you don't fear him. We need to move towards greater independence for the police so that their professionalism will show forth. I think there's a lot of power play there.
Kofi, but you are part of those who are in court trying to assert the right of Daniel Yao Domelevo. So you know that if the political system doesn't want you, they can actually, even though your office is not a sackable office, you can be sacked.
Yeah. I said so.
The reference to Charlotte Osei, it was what? Procurement breaches. The laws are clear about what should happen to you under procurement breach. Because there's a procurement breach in the police administration, the IGP should be sacked?
I said that they should be independent, even though in this country we've done things to independent institutions. However, Samson, we don't seek perfection. We move towards it. I believe it is a step in the right direction. And again, democracy is not for the politicians. It is for us. If we don't get up and defend these people, which is why we are in court defending Daniel Domelevo, and it's a pity that our Supreme Court has not, in my view, done its job regarding that. We will have to do those things that make institutions like the police more independent. Then we citizens have to fight to preserve and protect the independence. But ultimately, we are going to be beneficiaries of it.
Right. But in respect of that case, you know that sometimes lawyers also contribute to the delay in the court. So sometimes it's not exactly the court that has to be blamed for all of the delay.
If that is so, we will say so. But in this case, you and I know that the case hasn't been called.
Dr. Sarkwapong, you know, I'd like to ask one first question. Do you know what has happened to the 8 or so people who were killed in the elections? Because when we are reading the report and you are not too sure if you are reading about Ghana, they are telling you things that you already know. They in the section on respect for the integrity of the person, B, arbitrary deprivation of life and other unlawful or politically motivated killings. They refer to security agents that have committed arbitrary or unlawful killings of officers charged with investigating security forces killings include the Special Investigations Bureau of the Ghana Armed Forces and the Professional Standards Bureau. Of course, your good friend, Professor Kweku Asare, says the police should not be investigating itself whilst it prosecutes other people when they clash with them.
No, Samson, I don't know what happened to those 8 individuals. Maybe, and was there even an investigation launched into that? Maybe the investigation is still ongoing, but I don't think I know what has happened. The report is very worrying. Last year, I remember we were on the show discussing last year's version of the report and all of the concerns it raised. And here we are again a year later, still discussing some of those concerns. And I recall a comment from one of my friends who last year, when we were discussing this report, said, well, these are reports by external entities, and we should find a way of coming up with our own homegrown indigenous instruments that can be used to look at some of these issues. And I haven't had a chance. I don't want to be petty, but I think today I would reach out to him and be a little petty. I would reach back to him and say, well, at least if you look at the section on the police, some of the things that are being said about the police as an institution, Samson, anybody who read the report from Afrobarometer round 9, 2022, there was a section where there are about 6 or 7 specific questions that dealt with how the police exercises its powers in terms of how it deals with criminals, how it stops drivers, how it deals with protesters. And anybody who looks at that data would not be surprised on some of the things that are captured in this human rights report as it relates to the police. I just wonder the extent to which we take the feedback from these types of instruments seriously to the point that we are willing to do something about it, or whether we tend to see them as it's an indictment and we are not indictable, and therefore as an institution. And for me, the other worrying part is one of the liabilities I'm detecting in our democratic institutions, which is the low levels of trust. I think all of these things makes me understand more and more why, when you ask Ghanaians in Afrobarometer the extent to which they trust key institutions, that those levels of trust are very low. And I'm just hoping that at some point, especially as we are at this good threshold of 30 years of uninterrupted multi-party democracy, we would use it as an opportunity to say, how do we build our institutions? What kind of democratic practice, all the key stakeholders, what do we want to see over the next 30? Because I'm hoping that when we come back at Ghana at 60 of uninterrupted multi-party democracy, the story will be different. We would have reduced our liabilities and improved on our assets.
I don't know, but like me, would you like to say, even where the abuses appear to be becoming a bit widespread because of how they get reported, are you prepared to still call them excesses and isolated incidents, which should not be used to damage the security as their general label?
Yeah, I think when you begin to see, a pattern, so you're correct. When I was reading the report, initially a part of me was saying, well, in the grand scheme of things, if I count maybe, let's say, 100 instances of the exercise of police power and 8 were deviant exercise of that power, should I then say that, quote unquote, therefore the entire institution of the police is an issue, right? But at the same time, I think it is the accumulation of some of these deviations from the proper exercise of, whatever powers our institutions have that can ultimately become problematic. I think that is why whenever you see those deviant instances, you want to highlight them, you want to raise concern, so that the institution itself can say, okay, here are the things we are doing well, but here are the things that we are being indicted on, and therefore we need to address those things. Which is why I think former president's idea of this governance council to look at some of these things is a good idea in principle. For me, the ultimate utility of such a report would be, will the institutions themselves take that information, reflect, and put in corrective measures to address any challenges that a council like that would point out to a given institution.
Okay, thank you. They spoke about corruption, give some credit to Afrobarometer. They referred to Ghana Integrity Initiative. If we want to go there, we certainly will not be able to end this discussion. But the matters, and I'm at D. As for D, they say we are we are good. That's disappearances. There were no reports of disappearances by or on behalf of government authorities. Then C, torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment and other related abuses. They refer to a number of these and then say the police generally denied some of these things, and then go on to talk about the investigation and complaint processes did not effectively address reports of abuse and bribery. Results of internal police investigations were almost never publicly released. I referred to some of that just a while ago. Yes, Joyce.
That we now forget all the press conferences that used to greet such reports in times past. But none of that, Samson, the very worst record of the NDC at the time was still miles ahead of what President Akufo-Addo and his government have actually presented. If the report is silent on matters to do with torture, what can be more torturous than hunger and hardship and poverty? So certainly, I'm sure that the police are probably just another arm of all the challenges that we have. Samson, when President Obama visited here many years ago, he told us specifically that what Africa needs is to build strong institutions, strong independent institutions. I'm happy that one of the panelists actually referenced the issues to do with independent constitutional bodies. Are we able now to safely say that these so-called constitutionally mandated independent bodies are still independent? Suomoto. Take what is happening at the Electoral Commission, where you are literally appointing party activists to serve on the main umpire of rather very sensitive elections. Look at our electoral laws. Look at the level of fiduciary obligations that are imposed on the Electoral Commission. So when you have a face of the Electoral Commission beginning to look like an extension of the New Patriotic Party, then certainly Ghanaians have cause to worry. We saw the Afrobarometer report. You know, it's a very respectable, recognized report, and they published on all the same key indices as we are looking at in the U.S. Human Rights Report. Honestly, the stories are almost very similar. Maybe the U.S. report is just a bit more detailed than what Afrobarometer has given us. So what is it we are talking about? The fact that media freedoms have literally been under attack for a very long time are also matters that are within everybody's purview. Secondly, that the police presently is struggling even to actually stand within this independence. And you know, personally, and I don't speak on this matter for the NDC or for President Mahama, so let me just issue this disclaimer. I totally agree. And funny that a few days ago, I was actually having a conversation with some students of mine, and this matter of the police and a decentralized police force, an independent police force. Remember in the past even, we had IGPs who were not necessarily career policemen. We've had that before. All in a bid to ensure what? The independence of the police service. If we can achieve even a minuscule of that level of independence that the Constitution guarantees them, certainly maybe some of these things will be in the past. But look, what is it that people want to see in a country such as ours? Why did people believe so strongly that Nana Akufo-Addo then was indeed a man who believed in the rule of law? And yet we experienced the most intolerant of all governments under this Fourth Republic since he became president of this country. Have we not overly pampered him? Have we not overly burdened the subject of who this individual is as against what he does and how he does it? We don't have to wait for the US government to tell us the challenges that we ourselves face, that we experience, that we live by day in. Look at the defenses coming in defense of what Brian Achampong has said. And then what do they tell us? We have a fresh candidate coming. Is it just about winning elections? And when you talk about a fresh candidate, who really is a fresh candidate? A failed economist, a failed vice president, a failed chairman of the economic management team, a man whose credibility is now in such tatters that he hides under the guise of individuals such as Brian Achampong to speak in the manner that he will be unable to speak with the confidence that he'll be able to speak. But look, all these things feed into people's perceptions of what pertains in our country. The report speaks about corruption. Samson.
I don't want us to have a debate, but the reference to a man who hides under Brian Achampong and all, where does that come from?
All of that, it depicts the state of insecurity. How our security forces.
No, you're pointing at the vice president.
All of them.
And then you bring
yes,
Brian
because
Achampong
in fact, you reminded me. The reason why I rope in the vice president, he chairs the police council. He oversees everything that happens in the police service.
But is it fair and is it factual to relate Brian Achampong's comment to he being sort of a surrogate?
Impunity that has been interpreted.
I think that's not fair. I think that's not fair. And not factual in the first place.
Let me say something. When we talk about insecurity, what are we referring to? What are the things that feed into the perception of insecurity? What are the reasons why the police or the police would actually be singled out even for some of these challenges and meddling even by the state? Like I said, when the matter occurred in Swami, for example, did the police wait for any political interference or directions from anybody? They went straight ahead. We didn't even have a debate on your platform.
They have a discretion to exercise prosecutorially.
But
they determine who should be prosecuted and who should not.
Even within those discretions, there are limits. It is the reason why all of you are calling for what? Constitutional what? Amendments or a review for that matter. Because for the first time, that discretion has been called into question by an executive leader who simply doesn't give a toss about what anybody thinks. Samson, you and I don't need the US government to tell us what pertains. And you know, look, we are all probably politicians. So are we all lawyers. So are we all professionals of different categories. But first and foremost, we are citizens of this country. Whatever happens that causes any threats to our nascent democracy must be matters that concern all of us. And the fairness of these debates are really not the subject matter. Everything that is happening in Ghana so far is totally unfair. Tell me, where is the fairness that you see, even in how we are being administered as a people? How the executive relates to the citizens, how the police relate to the citizens, how various institutions demarcated as independent bodies of the state are being treated. In any case, in the past, we used to speak about the Electoral Commission having a chairperson whose tenure was secure. Do we still believe in that tenure being secure? If the Auditor General, whose position is independent, is currently in court and was removed because he was doing his job. Recently, you heard about the Attorney General taking on the sitting Auditor General for daring to publish a special report that he said was not within his purview so to do. So when you talk to me about fairness, about equality, about discretion, what are the discretions that you and I speak of? Okay. You and I don't have to define what the discretion means or what the limits of fairness on the discretion are. And when we speak about the times that it takes for even the courts to come out with rulings on some of these critical matters, these are all reasons why we are where we are. And personally, it is one of the things that I actually took from this conversation, even with President Mahama, this idea of a council of governance experts. And you know, today I know that sometimes we struggle to commend our CSOs. And I have these very interesting conversations with my brother from Imani, Franklin Kujo. And I'm happy that today Mr. Bentel has tried very hard to stay true to his conscience. And these are the sorts of conversations that I personally want to see. Samson, of what interest is Ghana to any political leader?
Part of the
if there's insecurity.
Having sat on this platform for how many years, moderating these shows, part of the problem is once you are in opposition, you are happy with the CSOs, you are happy with the media. Once you get into government, suddenly they turn to the demons that...
My brother, Samson, I totally
they
agree.
never were.
There has never been any government, any political party, more whipped by CSOs than the NDC or the PNDC. The records are public and you can speak.
All right.
So we have always been, you know, we've borne the brunt of the worst and the best of criticisms. So I don't want to belabor the point.
Right.
Look, these are matters that ought to be taken very seriously.
Right.
And so when a government refuses, Samson, you know, just a few minutes in the past, there will be press conferences if the NDC was in office, with people speaking all sorts of English and threats being issued, veiled and otherwise. What has changed? You see, let's remember that there are some individuals, even along and across the political divide, who are not different. I've been here many times.
All right.
Have you ever known me, even under President Mahama, to be different in terms of my views? You know, let's remember first and foremost that we are citizens. Like I said,
right.
If these reports are ignored, if the contents are not taken seriously,
right.
if remedial effects are not being made,
right.
then our democracy itself is going to be subverted.
Thank you. And the report talks about working conditions, the labor front. It talks about several other sectors of the economy and what has gone wrong and needs to be righted, so to speak. Spends quite a considerable time on the vexed issue of LGBTQ+ and the intolerance that has, culminated in legislation underway to prohibit those activities, among others. Yes, Doc, what will be your comments on the report as you see it, various aspects? It's not only about security, police, the charge and what they have done or have not done, government posture towards international and non-governmental investigations of alleged abuses of human rights, among the rest of them.
Yes. So, Samson, thank you very much. I see the report as an important resource document. I mean, first and foremost, as a researcher, I see it as a document where the government of Ghana would definitely have to take serious, make considerations. This government especially has been interested in retooling the security services. So it would be good for us to look at this and ask ourselves, where are the lapses then? Because it's not just about retooling and empowering the units, but it's also about looking at the lapses in it that do not subscribe to the human rights. And human rights is something that is fundamentally enshrined in our Constitution. Chapter 5 is very elaborate about that. And I like when Professor John Kwapon said, look, we have gone through 30 years of, and there hasn't been any break in our democratic. So this is a time when we need to even strengthen better the institutions that would ensure fundamental human rights. So I ask myself then, what have we done to build these institutions? And believe me, I'm one of the first people to say that the worst we can do is to use a political eye or angle to look at human rights, because fundamental human rights affect everybody, irrespective of which party you belong to. So I kind of chanced on a report, 26 May 2021, that actually started to talk about a decade of issues in fundamental human rights. I even looked at what Media Foundation was saying about 150 incidents of violation against journalists since 2002. And all of those things then speak to the fact that we'll be wrong if we start, pushing things politically, but let's look at it fundamentally. And so I'm very okay, and like the other co-panelists said, that if ex-President Mahama says, let's call for an independent body that looks at some of these reports and ask that, what do we go forward with? It's not a bad, but how do we build our institutions? Where do we want to see our democracy going? Is it about the fact that we take a look at our Constitution? And recently there's been a lot of discussion about constitutional review processes. What are we going to do? So is it time for us to ask ourselves that the very institutions that we are building, that we are now claiming are being politicized, how do we enshrine clauses or put them into our Constitution? I'm not a lawyer in this, but I think that where do we go from there to make sure that the Constitution also protects these institutions from political interference? And I want to correct my sister here. The vice president does nothing. It's about budgetary allocations. He doesn't meddle in police operations. Even the Ministry of Interior is not supposed to meddle in police operations. So I think some of these things are already pre-existing, and it's not for us to reinvent the wheel, but it's rather to ensure it. And something you see where that last statement in the report says that government took some steps to address corruption. I'm sure it's about the Office of the Special Prosecutor and etc. Human rights abuses by officials. We've passed the right to information bill and etc. But the actual thing is about the impunity. Do we have to enact new laws to deal with impunity? Because impunity is an individual thing. How much power do I hold? How much authority do I hold? And it's said in most of our power corrupts. Absolute power does what? Absolutely corrupts. So we need to look at some of these things and ask ourselves, where do we go from here? This week alone, suicide has been removed from Ghana's criminal offenses. Therefore, it's guaranteeing that individuals, if you survive attempted suicide, now you wouldn't be charged or arrested but you rather be given medical and psychological. And I think these are all steps in the right direction to protecting our fundamental human rights. So if you look at the report comprehensively, you come to a conclusion that it is not an indictment on political office. And we need to take it that way, that it's an observation about the implementation of how we look at our legislations, how we ensure that institutions are able to roll out the things that they are mandated to do, the modus operandi of state security agencies, criminalization of public false news and criminal offense. It's so many things. And I think this is the wholesome and comprehensive way that we must look at it. I also was waiting for us to go into this offense of unnatural carnal knowledge, a U.S. position against the current position of Ghana, where we are going, the LGBTQI rights. As a sovereign nation, we have our right to make our laws, and that is where we stand as at now. Does that mean that we should be taken for saying that because we have made such laws, we are being indicted, or we are being taken that we are not protecting fundamental human rights? I think this is also a conversation that we would need to have. As thorny and as touchy as the issue should be, we would have to do it. It's about the private members bill being drafted and the whole thing being brought into the media space and the different comments that came from different sides. You see, one of the things about that thing is, as much as we are crying that we have to take a position as Ghanaians, we also have to realize that everybody has a different stand. We are a country that strongly believes in different religious, has different religious beliefs. So people would also take a different stand, and all of these voices tend to enter the public space and have implications for the way some of these reports then come out. We're talking about how we protect fundamental human rights. So in my opinion, I think that the biggest challenge about all of these issues, especially when you look at the report talks about prison conditions being harsh because they are overcrowded, insanitary. I think there are a whole lot of other things that the report talks about. And in my opinion, I think the biggest challenge for us is the length of time we take in addressing some of these issues that come out with, the length of time we take in even dealing with cases that are even taken, and the fact that perhaps that is what discourages, because it's even mentioned in the report that victims don't like reporting. That is also an indictment on us. So these are some of the issues that we should therefore begin to look at. The period of time it takes in dealing with these cases. Some of the cases that, so when we talk about the election violence issues against journalists, and some action is taken, but the length of time makes the whole situation almost null and void.
So like I asked,
you never hear anything.
who did I ask? Was it Professor Kwapong?
Yes.
Do you know the status of the 8 killings, deaths that happened in the election 2020? You don't have an idea?
I don't have. In fact, I checked. I've looked at the
make you
report.
feel?
It makes me feel that this report then is pointing to these salient issues that we need to look at. And that's just what I've pointed.
Does it make
that the
you
length of
proud
time is
of
a
your
big
nation,
challenge?
proud of your country?
Would I say, does it make me
Eight
proud?
human
I'm very
lives.
proud to be Ghanaian. And I'm very proud that there were investigations and it's been taken up. But I'm not proud to say that it has taken so long. Because comparatively, these are issues. And I think that even recently, there was something about the EU. The EU made the report when they met all the parties and came out with the fact that these are some of the indictments. So I think that we need to tell ourselves that the systems or the institutions that are mandated to deal with these issues, how are we going to ensure that closure comes to assure Ghanaian citizens that there is something being done? I think it's not just about that, but then it also speaks to rape, domestic, all the different issues. And it seems that we kind of put all of them together and we allow...
It talks about the judiciary also.
It talks about that as
the
well.
pre-trial detention.
It puts all of this into one, big umbrella where the delays that it takes denies citizens fundamental. And that's why I say it is not about any specific administration, because I have chance of reports that speak to these issues occurring over the last decade. So then it calls for that independent body or something that starts to look at how do we move forward. Does it mean we have to review constitutions and put certain new clauses that actually speak to the fact that if this particular situation is not dealt with, or maybe fast-track courts or something, and that's where I think we need to be looking.
I had mentioned earlier, and sometimes one has to be cautious a bit about this, but where there are soups that are conducted, sometimes you get the impression that once you are poor and cannot afford a place to sleep, you are criminal. So they do the soups, and you see the people that they arrest. You know, some of them, sometimes when they parade them, you can see, somehow you can tell that they are just, maybe they were just passing by somehow, and they got arrested because probably they are shabbily dressed or something like that. And if people who are known and matter are even arrested for serious crimes, they get invited by the police. They flag, for example, the Oliver arrest under freedom of expression. And they say that on the February 11, police arrested Oliver Bakavomawo, an activist critical of the government, in response to a series of Facebook posts. After initially charging him with misdemeanor charges of making false statements, police upgraded the charges to felony treason and held him in prison for 35 days before a judge released him on bail.
Something, you know, security operations are based on intel and intelligence, which sometimes you and I are not privy to. So some of those soups, I may not be able to speak to them. But I will tell you something. I have always been very cautious with how I deal with police, you know, and I think that also comes as our individual responsibility. It's unfortunate, yes, and I know there's a lot of social injustice in our system, such that sometimes I even wonder about it when someone steals a goat, the sentence they are given to. Whereas if someone corrupts or embezzles a certain sum of money, either through bank, whether it's private or public sector, the sentence that is meted out to them. So I am very worried about some of those things. As a researcher, I look at it and I compare. But then it speaks to, again, the systems and the institutions and how we mandate or we allow the institutions to be more or less, should I say, I want to use a correct word, they are not compelled by certain, you know, standards or criteria that is set. So we leave a lot of decisions to be, you know, based on the persons.
What can we do as the citizens?
That's what I'm saying, that we've gone through 30 years of democracy that has been continuous and consistent. If we have two dominant political parties, can we bring our heads together? Because this is something that bothers everybody. Okay. It cuts across all board. If you think it won't be you today, tomorrow it can be your relative. So it is time for us to put our heads together and deal with these issues. That is my take on it.
Okay, thank you very much. And I suppose that as these matters are looked at, I'm still somehow, you know, just defiantly, you know, a believer of the fact that some of these things get highlighted and they get a bad brush over our institutions in a manner that is not good. So what it means is that our institutions must be careful about the things that they do. And a while ago, I was just referring to, when I started, I was referring to that situation that happened at the police headquarters. This is a political person, a national youth organizer, and he's been invited by the police. You must expect naturally that the party people will mass up there. And they did. And journalists are coming to cover. They are in a branded multimedia car. They are just pausing at the entrance because of the recent development changes that have happened at the headquarters place. They are pausing and trying to ask a police officer where exactly should they park or go. And they get arrested, get detained for a while, and their vehicle is impounded, you know, and it takes a court order, and a judge, you know, tells about his frustrations about police arresting people for traffic offenses and impounding their vehicles when the vehicle is not an evidence of any offense. Some of these things happen and they just, you know, get to give us such a bad light. I am one of those that every year the world processes in measuring the justice system in this country, I get questionnaires to fill. Yeah. This year, my questionnaire came, they kept repeating. I kept ignoring it because there were certain things I didn't want to talk about them, you know, and I didn't want to be unfaithful to the report. I will be blunt about it, but I don't want it because it makes my country bad. We take a break here. We return to ask what is going on in Washington, D.C., is it? My guests have been lawyer Joyce Bawumuk-Tare, who is spokesperson for former President John Mahama. Dr. Antoinette Thibault-Darkon is executive director, the Dankwa Institute, and deputy general secretary of the NPP. Dr. John Osai Kwapong is fellow CDD Ghana, and shortly we'll be joined by Harry Yamson, managing partner, Ishmael Yamsing and associate. Kofi Bento stays with us. We have Lord Mensah professor, and George Wiafe joins us also from where the talks are going on. We'll be right back.